Responsible Sports from the Field interview series in partnership with Waste Management Sustainability Services. And today we have a really exciting conversation to share. We're looking forward to chatting with Dave Christen from IRONMAN, and specifically the work with IRONMAN Boulder, which is an Evergreen certified Council for Responsible Sport event, and Lee Spivak from Waste Management. So a quick intro to the Council for Responsible Sport. If you're not familiar, it's a nonprofit organization. We support, certify, and celebrate events that are committed to going beyond the bottom line and acting on their social and environmental responsibility values and initiatives. Over 150 events have been certified through the Council for Responsible Sports certification program in 8 different countries. And it's basically a set of open source best practice standards that are specific to the sporting event sector. So the Council offers guidance and tools and examples and certifies events. We're happy to be talking today about natural resource management at the IRONMAN Boulder event with Dave Christen and Lee Spivak. So Dave is the race director of IRONMAN and helped manage last year's IRONMAN Boulder, and Lee is a senior associate with Waste Management's Sustainability Services team, and he helps manage sustainability programs at large events and in lots of sectors. So thanks for being here, you guys, and I want to turn it over to Dave to introduce yourself.
Awesome. Thanks, Shelley. Yeah, we are really excited to speak with both Waste Management and the Council for Responsible Sport. We've been a partner with Waste Management for a while, and we've learned a lot from each other over the years, and now are a new partner with the Council for Responsible Sport. In one sense, by gaining this certification, we've learned a lot from both groups as to how we can execute events in a more sustainable fashion, which has been awesome. We love working with both of these groups, and we've come a long way. We were already doing some of the things, but it's been awesome to learn from both of these groups on what we can do better at our events to be more responsible for the places that we're playing in. A bit more on IRONMAN itself. If those that are familiar, IRONMAN is traditionally a triathlon brand. We've done swim, bike, run for many years now. Where people swim for a long time, they bike for a long time, and they run for a long time. And a lot of people in the world would call us crazy. And they're probably right. A lot of crazy people try to accomplish 140 miles in one day, and that's where IRONMAN, the bread and butter of IRONMAN is. Beyond that, we actually do some other things. We also produce other endurance events as well. Specifically, we produce different running races now. The Rock and Roll Marathon Series is certainly one of the larger brands that people would be familiar with. Other things that we do are in the mountain biking scene and road cycling scene as well. Both the Cape Epic is a great event in South Africa, as well as the Pioneer Race, both really world classic mountain biking events. And then we're in the road cycling scene as well. So quite a swath of different endurance event that seems to be our go-to. Wherever we can make a human being sweat for a long time, that's what we try to do in terms of event production. And that's kind of the summary on IRONMAN.
Awesome. Yeah. So that sounds good. Let's take it over to Lee and hear a little bit from you on an intro.
Yeah. Thank you both again, and I'm really excited to talk about this. As Shelley mentioned, I work on a lot of different projects, but one of the main projects was IRONMAN Boulder, and as you can see here, it involves a lot of people, a lot of spectators, and it was really just a fun project to work on, and I'm excited to talk about this with both of you in particular because I think there's a lot of examples involved about what was valuable for IRONMAN and how it can actually translate to other events, so it doesn't just apply to this one example.
Right. Okay. So that's all some great context in this initial info as you're seeing on the screen right now to help you get an idea of that context to understand and shed some light on really we want to look at the business case for why look at these things. In addition to, yes, it's the right thing to do, we need to do it, but let's see if we can talk about the business case for the issue, addressing the issues of natural resource management. And I really am looking forward to talking to you guys about water, energy, greenhouse gas emissions, and of course, waste. So, so Dave, this was the first time that Ironman pursued a certification from the Council for Responsible Sport, and you guys performed exceedingly well, getting 56 out of the total 61 possible credits in the certification standards. So that's the highest level of certification possible to Evergreen. So after doing that, you know, what does it mean to you guys to have a sustainable event? Why does it matter to you?
Great question. I think a lot of credit goes to Waste Management in this respect as well. I would hate to, I think those are great numbers, 56 out of 61 credits. I will say that was a hard task, but a lot of that was having somebody alongside of us, likely with Waste Management, to be able to guide us through how to accomplish that. Because it's to somebody that might be new to this council certification, they might say, okay, that seems, there's 61 steps that I got to do. That's really not the case. It's certainly something that we're striving for, but it's a lot easier than you think. And when we talk about the business case in and of itself, to accomplish those steps are really simple processes. It's not a hard thing to accomplish as an event. And really, I would suspect as you expand that out beyond events, it's probably an easy thing for anybody to accomplish. But anything, like many other organizations, Ironman is interacting in the community and in the environment that we live in, and in this case that we play in. So a lot of our athletes travel from around the world to race these events. We're in the community, in this case in Boulder, a very beautiful community that already has a huge focus on its environmental impact. And it was really easy for us to kind of plug and play some of the items that Lee was coaching us on in respects to what the council was looking for to accomplish this certification. A sustainable agenda aims to improve these impacts. The agenda for us was to try to accomplish as many of these things as we possibly could, and then more importantly, to do so in a way that made budgetary sense. Anybody that's listening to this webinar will certainly be looking at, okay, what does it cost for me to do these things? We're going to make the argument today as that there's some intrinsic value, that return on investment for accomplishing some of these items. It happens in a hurry. So certainly sustainability is a part of what Ironman wants to accomplish in every community that we're in. We chose Boulder just because it was somewhere that we wanted to take the first step as an organization, and we're now rolling some of those efforts out into all of our events around the world. Any host community that you're working in, this is a good point. This is a good relationship builder. This is a good foundation that as you're working in communities in the special event world, and when you start talking about the things that you're going to do to enhance their community and to protect the place that the home that they have, it goes a long way. It means a lot to the communities that we're in, and it makes everybody, it's a really great story to tell in the local media outlets that are there. But yeah, there's a lot of wide variety of positive impacts. It not only spreads positive brand perception of whatever brand that you're representing, but also it tells a good national story for any brand, and in this case, Ironman's commitment to the community and commitment to the environment itself. So it really goes beyond what you're doing, and it tells a great story that is beyond just the sports that we're participating in. Again, back to the point on what leveraging points or return on investment you can have, when you start telling this story about protecting the communities that you're in, that goes a long way for brands that want to partner with you. And that turns into great partnerships, which turn into great events, which, as everybody can attest to with our brand, it's come a long way in the many years that we've been doing this, and it's done a lot, and specifically in Ironman Boulder.
Yeah, that's all fascinating to hear, and I'm imagining that in every organization, Ironman and everywhere, there's looking at the issue of sustainability is really that lens that can be applied to everything. rather than, a sort of prescription of activities. So I'm wondering, considering that it touches just about everything that happens, how did support from higher up help make this happen at IRONMAN Boulder?
Another great question, Shelley. It certainly was a initiative that came from the top, from our organization. We said, okay, we were doing, as I had mentioned before, we were doing a lot in Boulder already in terms of reducing our waste, but we wanted to say, okay, where can we partner with the council as well as partner with Waste Management, and together do something that had never been done, at least in our brand, and in our organization. So it came definitely from the top in terms of what we were willing to do and what we were willing to try at an event to accomplish a certification. Everyone contributes to sustainability of an event. So when you talk about hierarchy in an organization, it certainly came from an initiative from internal, but every single person plays a part in that equation. So when you're talking about an event like ours, you've got athletes, you've got volunteers, you've got spectators, you've got community members, you have service providers. Everybody contributed to our certification. So we're going to talk about some examples later on, I'm sure, but our caterer, for example, went above and beyond what we have done in the past with them to source organic and locally grown items for our food that we used at our event. And that is maybe a small step of the 61 steps that we needed to do, but as the point still stands is that everybody does contribute. And if you look at your supply chain backwards, and we're going to talk about that as well, it's really easy steps that you can make and efforts that you can take to accomplish these great things for a community. And let's also be direct. The certification is great. But when we talk about our responsibility in the communities that we're in, take the certification aside and put that in its box, this is the right thing to do, and that's where it came to us. That was the initiative from the top in our leadership. Our leadership team was to say, okay, where are we missing, and where do we need to get better? And that's where we really put everything behind this effort. So whether it's including underprivileged youth, whether it's reducing your water and energy consumption, increasing your waste diversion. We already were doing a lot of work with nonprofits, but that's another example that you would see in the certification. It goes a long way, and it really does touch so many facets of the communities that we're in.
I couldn't agree more with that. I'm hearing you say that collaboration is key. So along with that, I would ask you, can you say a little bit more about how do you get that groundswell of support going for all of these different initiatives, as they do touch so many different aspects and you need all hands on deck?
I think this conversation started with having a great partner in Waste Management. We would not have even come close if it wasn't for the work that Lee had done to just educate us. We were doing, like I said, we were doing some things, but there was a whole host of items that, unless somebody is there to point you in the right direction and to say, okay, these are some other opportunities that you have to do better in these categories, we would have missed by a long shot. So I think the conversation starts when you talk about the team that you build. I think having Waste Management on our team was critical in that aspect, and we built our relationship, Waste Management and IRONMAN's relationship, with this goal in mind. And it certainly was hard in some categories, but if we had not had coaching in this case from Waste Management and from Lee, we would have fallen drastically short of where we came. And again, it's very attainable, but it certainly helps to have somebody alongside of you to point you in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a nice segue. So, Coach Lee, can you shed some light on how you got this thing going and what kinds of education you were providing?
Yeah, sure. I'll also just throw it back at Dave and IRONMAN and say that they were enthusiastically on board in a way that when I had ideas or new innovative proposals for them, they said yes and tried to put everything that they possibly could into it. But I will say that I don't know if this sponsor, we've been working with IRONMAN for a while, but this newer element of the sponsorship, I don't know if it would have happened without this kind of aggressive sustainability agenda. Waste Management really wants to go beyond traditional logo placement in our sponsorships and our partnerships, develop programs that are more meaningful and valuable to all stakeholders. After a decade of working on sustainable sporting events and waste management, really trying to stand out as a leader in this industry, we want to support events that have that type of sustainability agenda. And to us, it offers a clear win-win. You're able to kind of do a lot of different types of cross-promotion. Waste management's able to utilize our team, our unique sustainable event management expertise. And this actually helps Ironman and its various stakeholders and sponsors, at the event. And on top of that, it's a better story for all of us to share, one of heightened value, and it's more attention grabbing. So it's kind of, winning all around. And we wanted to be able to tell a story of what we've done together, and working with Ironman at the Boulder event, we were able to do that.
I'll double click on it. That's exactly the point that from our perspective, from Ironman's perspective, Lee just hit it on the head. A lot of people would ask, why would you even want to pursue this type of a certification? And there's marketing value that comes with this. Again, we can talk about the different categories that this falls under. And yes, the certification is certainly a marketable thing. But again, I think all of us that are listening and everybody that is on this call, Lee and Shelley both would agree on this. It's the right thing to do. So there's multiple ways to look at it. And I think with the foundation being it's the right thing to do, there's other intangibles that come with it, or other ancillary benefits that do come with that. These adjustments didn't add a lot of major costs to us. Most events these days, or most businesses these days, are ensuring that they are doing some sort of proper recycling or composting at some level. At Ironman Boulder, we were already doing we were trying to divert a lot. So we had what we call a zero waste program. So we had a compostable, recyclable, and a trash stream, or a landfill stream, that we had at all of our events. And we were doing whatever we could for years to mitigate as much as we could going into the landfill and into the other diversion streams. So that was certainly something that we were already doing. I would argue that most people you're already paying for that. You're already paying for a trash hauler to handle these streams. It just takes you researching what type of supplies are coming onto your events so that you can reduce how much is going into the landfill. Like many events, it did add some operational expenses a little bit, but I would say not much. It really didn't hurt us at all on the bottom line when we came down to it. Pursuing the certification did significantly more on the marketing side in terms of improving our athletes' experience or our engagement with the people that are in our event or observing our event, and provided marketing content that we probably weren't generating in another way. In terms of the value, there's a lot of people that came to us once we had identified that we were in Evergreen, which was a really high certification to get with the Council for Responsible Sport. We were able to create new partnerships for people that just wanted to be alongside of us in that journey, that wanted to say, okay, because you're doing this and because we want to tell the collective story, we're gonna come along with our product or with our services, and we want to get into your slipstream and we want to help you out. So when you talk about how does this help you in terms of money, when it all comes down to the bottom line, your marketing value is off the charts. And I think, Lee, would you agree to that? It pays off.
Yeah, I think so too, and I hear this question from a lot of people, is how do you kind of get started? Because once we got this off the ground for Ironman, it really helped, as Dave just talked about, help them engage more partners to actually create tangible revenue. But a lot of people just getting that first step accomplished can often be done through sponsorships like this. If you're able to use an existing sponsor or find a new sponsor or hire a consulting team like ours at Waste Management with this type of, long-standing expertise and experience at different venues, you can utilize those relationships to get something to elevate it to the point where it's bringing in tangible revenue in addition to the marketing value that Dave just talked about. Your existing sponsors and partners can help you with these goals, and more this type of coordination is actually a competitive advantage and leads to more valuable engagements, just as Dave mentioned.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that, Lee, you mentioned Waste Management is looking in its sponsorships to go beyond, traditional logo placement. And I would say that we've heard that echoed in lots of different channels in recent years and more and more. So with that, I think that I'll take a moment to say from the council's perspective that there's a few key value points of the certification specifically that I would want to touch on, and just to put them into three broad buckets, it would be guidance, the identification of those key programs, gaps, and opportunities. So just simplification, right? Improving the efficiency of the process of getting there. You have some sustainable values. How do you implement them? And the certification provides that framework to do that. Then the second bucket would be expectation. As I mentioned at the beginning of this comment, people are expecting action more and more, and that goes from the events that they're participating in to the sponsors and the brands that are represented there, and just generally kind of consumer choice is trending towards greater responsibility, and market research is showing that. The council will have some interesting stuff coming out in the near term around that piece specifically too. The third piece I'd add is that external verification and the validation piece. So as people are asking, what companies are doing to help their communities and be responsible about their impacts, the certification just helps, as I mentioned, bring all those diverse stakeholders to the table, but it provides them, all of those parties, the confidence, the ability to point at something very tangible, specific, and documented to verify those claims and really uphold the transparency of the whole endeavor. So with that, I'll leave it there. I could talk about that for all day, but we're going to move into some details. So I am really curious to hear on the operational side, Dave, what did you learn through the process in terms of your materials coming in, going from the event, and how you deal with them on the back end on the waste management side of things?
Yeah, we learned a ton. Your supply chain is critical in any business. Ours is the same as any other business that's operating in any industry. We've got stuff that we need to order and source to be able to provide a product. And in our case, our product is an experience, an event. And that Lee coached us on, I like that reference to Lee, by the way, Shelley. We'll call him Coach Lee for the rest of this webinar because I think that's fitting for him. He did really coach us well on how we look backwards. I think the greatest lesson you can learn in this conversation and in this vein is, okay, what type of product, what type of supplies are coming to your venue? So look backwards. So a great example is if the listener can imagine in these endurance events, there's periods throughout the day where our athlete needs to refuel. They need to get some sort of fuel, and in this case, food, water, and like some sort of drink that helps them pursue this end goal of accomplishing the finish line. And at these little feed stations, or these aid stations, we call them, they're consuming a lot of product that goes right into them, but there's also the delivery of how we get that to the customer or to the athlete. So we've got a cup to have water or a cup to have Gatorade. Those things, that's a great example of looking backwards in your supply chain and saying, okay, well, what type of cups are you getting? Sure, I could probably get a really cheap styrofoam cup in mass quantity from big box wholesaler in town, but is there a better source that we can find? So in our case, we actually use compostable cups at all of our races now in the U.S. They produce them in mass quantity. It's actually it was a Navy product. We found it. So it's the same product that the Navy uses because they literally can throw it off the side of their ship and it just decomposes in the ocean. That's the story that they told us. I don't know if they actually do that or not. So the idea is that, I'm sorry, Shelley, but the idea is that you go backwards and you look at those items that you have and you say, okay, how do I source those responsibly as opposed to getting them for, as opposed to these things going into the wrong stream.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and so so you were looking at the procurement and kind of having maybe moving towards a policy, or what other challenges did you run into as you kind of looked at that procurement piece?
Yeah, that's you mentioned policy, and I think that it did become a standard for us for sure. We started to look across all of our events, so as basically, and now back to the point earlier of once we received this certification and obtained the certification through the Council for Responsible Sport, we've now started implementing those same policies around our entire organization. It's taking some time, so not all communities have the same resources that we do here in Boulder. That's just the honesty. So, for example, composting is not something that you have like a lot of communities have really easy access to. We happen to have that here. Doesn't mean that you can't obtain the certification. You can still work hard towards recycling, which pretty much every community, at least in North America, has the ability to do now. And it's certainly an easy thing to replicate in terms of across your different business units.
Yeah, definitely. And that waste diversion piece is key, and it, a lot of people, a lot of organizers have spent a lot of time thinking about it and working on it. Was it easy for you guys, or did you run into some challenges?
It certainly has challenges. It was easy in many ways. Again, we were kind of implementing some of the items already. And when you're talking about waste, it's not an easy task. It's also not a very glamorous task. And I think it's on all of us as an organization, any organization, sorry, to recognize the work that's being done in this area. So a lot of our hardest accomplished, or the hurdles that we had to overcome, was just staffing the needs that we had to be able to accomplish this. It's something that our whole team had to embrace, and we had to all put our efforts behind to make sure that it happened. We had total control over certain areas. We didn't have control in other areas. As we can all, another example is someone can walk into the coffee shop up the street and they can grab a coffee and maybe a snack of some sort, and they come to your venue, or they come into your place of work, and they're bringing in a waste stream, or a waste item that doesn't go into one of the streams that you're trying to focus on, which is recycling and composting. So we had to really educate the people that were coming to our event. So we did a lot of pre-education with our customer ahead of time, telling them that these are things that we focused on. Got a lot of our volunteers the same message, so that when people would arrive to IRONMAN Boulder, they knew that this was an initiative that we were trying to do, and it was on the forefront of their mind. So we tried to make sure that they had ample information coming into the event and knew what we were expecting when they got here, and what to expect from our volunteers and from our staff to accomplish this effort.
Yeah, and you guys did a great job and got to a pretty high rate of diversion. And maybe, Lee, do you want to add anything from your experience, this last year, and what you might emphasize about other, as other people are trying to set up their programs for success?
Yeah, sure. I think two of the main points that I would emphasize that Dave made is that when you can control what's coming into your event, you can really control where it goes, and then also you want to make sure you reach every single stakeholder. So those were the two things that I really tried to help IRONMAN with in particular, and we do that at events as well as other across other sectors. But along with that, I would also say that while diversion is important, it's not there's other important metrics to consider, and building a comprehensive sustainability program ensures that the event is considering all environmental impacts. It's truly in all the details. Events and really any large organization, they really need a plan of action when there's a high volume of materials. You want to try to set parameters around what is being brought on site, and while engaging stakeholders sounds simple, any event manager will tell you that the various complexities involved are everywhere. We helped IRONMAN kind of every step of the way, trying to understand local requirements and really consider every potential environmental impact that would be relevant for all of their operations. It goes from contract language when you're, as Dave mentioned, when you're talking with your food vendor or other vendors. It goes into vendor selection and then stakeholder evaluations and support, all the way through event implementation and then follow-up, because after the event, you're able to try to emphasize what you want to improve the following year and make sure that you're circling back to find those areas where you could alter things a little bit to have a pretty big impact. And waste management, and I kind of take this in my personal life, but more and more as a company, we try to prioritize a view of waste in the larger sense. Wasting fuel and energy, wasting water, wasting time and effort is a big one across any industry. Wasting engagement and education opportunities. When you talk about something like Ironman, they have the volunteers, they have the athletes, they have the vendors and the various other stakeholders that are on site. And if you miss those opportunities, you know, you're missing out on a chance to do more or do better. And this type of planning and consideration helps elevate operational commitment and really reduce waste typically.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about a conservation mindset, and that seems to be resonating with a lot of people lately, for good reason. And I think that's a great transition. And so you're mentioning the necessity of having a waste management plan. Let's take it over, and then you're also talking about the broader sustainability program. So let's take it broader than waste and talk about water. So using a conservation mentality as it relates to water. Why is that important, Lee? And what do you see with events you're working with, and what do you see at IRONMAN Boulder? And maybe that's a better question for Dave to start.
Sure. Yeah. Water access and drought conditions are things that all of us should be concerned about, obviously, depending on when the listeners and viewers check out this webinar. I think in the most recent past, we've had significant drought conditions in certain parts of the country that we all should be aware of and we all should be paying attention to. And how can you play a part in helping those situations? It's like you said, Shelley, the mindset, the lifestyle, maybe another as well to add in there, of reducing our impact is critical. We all need to own it. We all need to be a part of it. In the event world, we come in and we use a significant quantity of water, and then oftentimes we'll just leave that community. It's important that we understand the impact, the negative impact that those might have, and try to reduce those areas and try to do better. Every organization needs water for operations, and reducing usage can often reduce costs, but it also supports the local and regional water supply. Again, it comes back to just responsibility. We need to own it, and we need to be a part of the solution and not create more problems.
All right, so let's take it one step further. And what kind of efforts are we talking about here? How can you conserve water at an event? And did you have some costs associated with any of the things that you tried?
I think this is where I thought, in my opinion, where I learned most from Coach Lee, and that was little steps go a long way, especially when you talk about water conservation. So you might not have the silver bullet to make all of your water impact go away. That's not really the end goal. We know we're going to consume water, but what small steps can we take? So our water program did grow a lot. We had a few existing initiatives in place. We basically were trying to be responsible, but we never really knew, okay, what was our total impact? We never really tracked it. So Lee and I spent a lot of time just trying to figure out exact numbers. Okay, how are we going to measure this? And once we started looking at the things that we were measuring, we started to identify, okay, this is a small area where we can preserve. This is a small area where we can use less. This is a small area. And we combined all of those things to accomplish the end goal of reducing our impact on the water supply in the area. One example is we, again, back to the aid station. So again, for the listener, if you're in this aid station, you can imagine these runners or these bike riders or whatever the athlete is doing at the time is coming through these aid stations. They're often really warm. They're hot. So we're trying to find a way to cool them down. well, traditionally we used to use sponges, which now that I know more from Lee as to what sponges do to the environment in general, we would soak those things with water and we'd let the athlete kind of just squeeze them over top of their head and then carry on. And it was basically a way for them to cool off. So we saw that as an area. Okay, let's look at other means by which we can cool athletes off. Can we provide more other alternatives, I guess, for them to get a little bit cooler temperatures? And we were able to accomplish that. So at some of our races, we use over 20,000 sponges. So we were able to eliminate that as well as the water that was used to do that. So again, back to your return on investment here, when you're making these small steps, we were able to save money on our sponges as well as reduce how much water we were using. We reduced an average of 40 gallons of water per aid station. That sounds okay, 40 gallons of water, whoop-de-doo to the listener. That's a lot multiplied by, we've got people on our run course for 26 miles. I've got an aid station every mile. You start doing the math, and again, it's a small step that we took that added up into the bigger roll-up of being better with water.
Yeah, absolutely. Nicely done. First of all, and then Lee, what else came into play when it came to water? And then a question operationally, how do you track water usage for a whole event when you've got a broad footprint like IRONMAN Boulder does?
Yeah, so we started by documenting how each operational element or each stakeholder uses water: the venue, the vendors, the fans. This involved coordinating with all of the moving pieces, working with utility representatives to get the metered water information, tracking invoices, and engaging suppliers. It typically requires some calculations as well. For example, IRONMAN uses a part of a building, and trying to figure out exactly how much water their employees are using in part of that building is complicated. So we help them estimate usage just beyond the metered and bottled water. So, when you can't get data, you're able to use some conservative assumptions and, calculate water consumption for their headquarters. This also represents an opportunity to add some value. Going through this process of tracking water is not necessarily easy, but it makes consumption tangible internally. You can really put it in front of someone. Everyone has to see the numbers and the sources. People are compelled to get involved in planning when they see that, because you're able to point out what's being used as well as what could be reduced and eliminated. It also demonstrates transparency to stakeholders. IRONMAN not only presented those numbers internally, but we worked with them to write their first sustainability report. And while this was their baseline year of tracking, they still put it all out there, so you can actually go out and look at all of this detail. And so if you have a similar event or you're just curious about it, you can go through each line item of their water consumption. And it's to me that's always important because it demonstrates a commitment to transparency. Events consume a lot of water, so it's important for them to tell the story and then actually do something about it.
Right, absolutely. And I think this is where sport in general has an incredible platform to use its influence to educate, to engage. And so along those lines, Dave, could you tell us a little bit about how you guys did that at Boulder and specific to the water piece? Because I know that you guys prioritize conservation, but you can't not use any. So then you guys took it to the other side of things, which is educate and engage. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, I think Lee did a great job of talking specifically to the mechanics of how mathematically you accomplish these things, and that's the piece I thought that our partnership with Waste Management guided us through this certification process the most. Is we needed help in trying to understand what was our total reach. And when you talk about how was this story and how was this initiative amplified beyond the event, I can't tell you how many conversations I had separate to IRONMAN Boulder. I usually have a lot. I'm in this community a lot, and we have a lot of just ancillary conversations that happen. But for this specific year, we had a lot of conversations wrapped around what we were doing at this level. Waste Management helped us go one step further in analyzing our data to ensure that we could implement the actual water restoration program itself. So again, coming back to your partners, having somebody like Waste Management alongside of you to guide you through these things, they can help you get and accomplish these goals. We would not have developed this amazing initiative on our own. We, again, needed that help and that education from these guys with waste management. But we went one step further and we started talking a little bit about what's called water restoration credits, or basically you hear a lot of people talk about carbon offsets and things like that. We started looking at all of those details, and specifically on the water front, we purchased water restoration certifications from Water Restoration for Bonneville Environmental Foundation specifically to cover three times the race's water usage. Why did we choose 3 times? We thought because of how long this event has been around, we wanted to cover more than just the one year that we've been operating. We wanted to almost catch up a little bit as to what we've been doing in the past, what was our impact in the years prior that this event has existed, as well as, okay, now this is 2016 being our foundational year. Let's move forward and make sure that we accomplish this each year. With conservation and restoration efforts, we had a lot more to talk about. So back to that point about how you can start conversations. Again, another great example of how this helps you financially. I had a great conversation with somebody about what we were doing with our water conservation. This person happened to own a business that was not clear as to what the water restoration credits were. That person, not only did they become a part of our event and a partnership and actually was in our expo because of that conversation, they were able to then implement similar processes and procedures in their own place of work. So this, it's amplifying beyond the event now, right? You can see the ripple effect, and all of a sudden, because you have a conversational piece besides, in my case, swim, bike, run, and Ironman, all of a sudden now I can touch more people. And the education element was critical. Waste management helped us promote these issues, promote the solutions on our social media chains. We also coordinated with the Colorado Water Trust to educate attendees, so they were actually at our event, and they were helping people understand how much water they were consuming. You saw a previous slide of a gal showing a picture of how much water was consumed to create one hamburger. That's a great example of, okay, you're educating people and they can take that home, and now you see that ripple effect, and it's going into the lives of the people at your event. And back to your question about cost, this required nothing really in terms of us to do. To restore your water, how much water you're consuming is not a huge hit on your operational budget. And then to have somebody like the Colorado Water Trust attend your event, I can tell you, at least in the event world, it doesn't cost me anything to have them come and be helpful and help our athletes and our spectators be better engaged with this process.
Yeah, I would just add that this is an amazing program, and really educating people about embedded water, which is the water that Dave was just pointing out that goes into the products and the food that we consume. Having this type of program when you have such a strong local audience, but more and more like Ironman, you have a regional and national audience as well. You're able to just talk about your impact and expand your impact in a whole new way. It's really, to me, amazing when an event can prioritize programs that have that type of regional impact and utilize the access to this larger audience to share the narrative. Ironman was able to, as Dave mentioned, both online and offline, share this type of impact and this type of program to have a more lasting, broader accomplishment to share and give them new opportunities to promote their type of sustainably focused values. This type of thing goes beyond the event and continuously in the future. There's the sustainability report, the Going Green and Ironman video, the conversations that Dave is still having about this. It was a new element, and it's a huge impact for them to be able to talk about. It was really fun for them to kind of see the fruits of that labor.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that, Dave mentioned having the Colorado Water Trust on site. A lot of communities have a water trust or similar organizations, watershed councils. There's a lot of good people doing work around water, specifically conservation, and that goes hand in hand with, place-based ecological restoration, which has a nice local tie-in. So it seems like this is an effort that could be replicated depending on the circumstances and the partners in wherever you all are out there who are listening, looking to to start something, it's a great place to just start a conversation. And I loved hearing you say, Dave, that you've had many and that some of them have resulted in actions that are helping move the needle forward towards a more responsible, way of operating. We've got a lot to cover here, and because we're talking about sustainability so broadly, it touches so many aspects. So we've covered waste a little bit. We talked about water. Let's talk energy for a few minutes. I'd like to hear specifically if you guys looked at renewable energy and alternative fuels for Ironman operations, and maybe Dave could shed some light on that.
Yeah, great point, and it does have a lot of fingers to this conversation, and one of them is energy. It's events specifically. We have a lot of transportation, so a lot of people are trying to get to an event, and a lot of things are trying to get to the event. So people and things both together. We were prioritizing a reduction of our fuel consumption as much as we could. It's not just a good story, like I'd mentioned when we talked about water. Waste management, again, came into this conversation very specifically and helped us figure out, okay, how much were we actually using? So it's really, you could look at your gas line item or your fuel line item in your budget, and that might be a good starting point, but you have to look beyond that. You have to look, again, back in your supply chain. You have to consume or see how much you're consuming in all of these exercises or in all of these items and steps that it takes to put on an event. So we needed to map it all out, and to be honest, we had a hard time with this. We can talk about that a little bit later, but what we did do is we started to look at, again, those little steps to accomplish bigger goals, and we tried to provide little means by which people could reduce their fuel consumption. So we provided shuttles at local meetups. So on race day, we basically tried to eliminate how much driving people were doing, so people were just using our shuttle system, which consolidated travel. We also offered different things like a bike valet for attendees. So again, a lot of people would like to ride a bike, but they're worried about, okay, what do I do with my bike once I get there? So we let them just have a free bike valet, as you can see in the image now, that people would just leave it. It was secure, and it was an easy step for us to accomplish, a bigger goal. We also offered bike free credits at the B-Cycle like a bike kiosk or like a bike share program in this community. A lot of communities now have bike share programs where you can kind of pay to use a bike to get from kiosk to kiosk. So we are offering free credits to our athletes in that respect as a complimentary thing for them at the event, which was great, hugely used, and an easy thing to engage. Again, another local partner, and to talk about return on investment and marketing dollars. You can go to those bike valet or those bike kiosks and partner up with them. Waste management also helped us track the total greenhouse gas emissions from all the activities at the event. And then we, in turn, purchased carbon offsets to cover all of the operational emissions for the first time as well. Again, something that we had never done before, but to go to that next level, we wanted to prioritize.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you guys hit any barriers with looking at your energy? You mentioned that you struggled a little bit, or maybe not struggled, but you looked at some things and learned. What did you learn?
This is a good one. Renewable energy is hard, right? It's a very hard thing to find because as our culture continues to get better at that piece, there's still some gaps in how we can access renewable power. So this just depends. A lot of it's site to site, venue to venue, or business to business. It just depends on kind of what resources you have available. So it was hard for us to find specifically, as an example, a biodiesel generator. Would be a great thing to have. We just couldn't find that to be able to switch to renewable power and accomplish that at our event. So we had to look at other means by which we were doing that. So instead of using maybe a generator, was there a way to consolidate that task into another area that was already consuming power that we could basically share the resources? That was another step that Lee coached us on to be able to accomplish those credits. I'd also add that while several initiatives were new, we did have several underway, and Lee provided the experience and expertise to help us properly track everything and identify those new opportunities. Again, back to your partnership with Waste Management, that's the piece that we needed to be able to accomplish this, is somebody to help us identify those new opportunities.
Yeah. Lee, anything to add on that?
Yeah, so we work with a lot of different events, and I try to remind anyone we work with that there's always challenges in this process, but the sooner you get involved, the more you can avoid the cost-heavy issues. I've seen events try to do this themselves, or even work with another consulting team that may not have this type of diverse expertise, and it doesn't always work out as intended. You have to have the right person in the room who understands how to engage vendors and sponsors and stakeholders and really look for the right partners in the community. And in this case in particular, I would also try to stress site selection. Obviously, this doesn't apply to every type of event because some events are in the same place every year, but the venue and the location you choose determines a lot of the services and the potential partners you have available. Going back to all of the things we've talked about, you want to look into the waste diversion operations, the alternative energy availability, and the water scarcity concerns when you pick a location. And when we work with an event, when we can get involved pre-site selection, it really helps us help them not only choose the right location, but then also kind of, like I already touched on, get into the contract language and the expectations of various partners so you can discuss all of your goals and make sure that you're avoiding issues. When an event does a cost analysis and figures that it can buy equipment that provides or supports renewable power and fuels, it's really advantageous, especially when that equipment is used year over year. So even if you are in the same spot over and over again, you can try to use certain material management approaches to avoid the additional costs that are related to energy.
Right. Yeah. I like that takeaway about site selection and taking a close look at it. A lot of events plan their site a year or more in advance, so the earlier the better if you're going to be thinking about those things. I want to transition into talking about engagement a little bit more and communicating. The tracking the performance is one thing, and reporting on it and communicating it effectively is another. So looking for tips and what's worked well for you guys and maybe what's not. Dave, do you have any thoughts on communicating your programs?
Yeah, that's a huge piece to this puzzle as well. When you can cast a vision for everybody involved, it's really easy for people to jump in and get in line with what you're asking them to do. And in this case, we often would tell our story about the Council for Responsible Sport and our partnership with Waste Management collectively before we even started our conversations with some of our vendors, because once we did that, we were able to absorb their efforts into our own and say, okay, now we're all collectively trying to accomplish something. So with the help of Waste Management, we created documentation, vendor requirements, and surveys and trainings that were available in different means, whether it was through our athlete information or through our social media postings. We tailored all the information based on who the audience was. And by doing that, we were able to help that person become a part of the process, become part of the solution, become part of the effort. So it's important to list out your stakeholders and develop a clear plan for each group. So this is a painstaking process in one sense, but when you start to see the collective benefit that this brings to your event, this was huge. This was paramount, is how you communicate it and how you track it, because then all of a sudden people are like, okay, I'm a part of this, and I'm not just doing what I'm told here. I am now accomplishing something great. We specifically, I mentioned an example earlier about our catering company. Once we told the story to them about what we were trying to accomplish with the Council for Responsible Sport, and Waste Management was then able to come in and then coach them through how to help us get to the same collective goal, it was huge. I mean, this was the piece, in my opinion, that I was astonished at how quickly our caterer was like, this is cool, I'm jumping in, I'm all in, let's do this. And it was, again, a great partnership has been formed. And since then we've used them a number of times, and they just continue to do the exact same thing now that they know how to. So Waste Management definitely helped us find those opportunities to succeed while considering the unique considerations that each organization and individual have to play.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, and just to jump on there, I mean, I don't have too much to add from Dave, to what Dave said, but I would say that, from what he just said, when you're able to kind of get that started and share your goals and the story with people, they do jump on board. And each year, as I kind of touched on, you're able to focus on continuous reinforcement and improvements. People want to do better each year, and people want to be able to not only support your goals, but also share them for themselves. So that catering company can now go to another organization and say, we have this ability to, you don't just hire us to provide food. If you want to do an environmental approach, we have all the tools ready. So when you focus on that type of communication, it really works on multiple levels and, gets better over time.
Awesome. Okay, so we are going to move towards wrap up here. We've heard a lot of great stuff from both of you. And so I guess my closing question is, can we wrap up 2 or 3 key takeaways, the important lessons that you each learned through going through the process of really looking at, a broad range of sustainability related initiatives for this event. And ideally those, those lessons could be applied to someone who's listening and as they're getting going. So what'd you learn? Dave?
The lots. Gosh, I wish I had another 45 minutes to be able to share with everybody the lessons that I learned. Thanks to Coach Lee, we learned a lot of these things together. I think there isn't one statement specifically is that this is probably one of the greatest investments that you could make operationally for your event. The value significantly outweighs the costs in a lot of categories. We've mentioned a bunch of them, but I can't tell you how this is one of the greatest investments that you can make towards your brand, towards your experience for your customer. This is just flat out one of the greater stories that you can tell about your event or your business if you're not already telling this story. Increasing waste diversion certainly comes at a higher cost, but you have to look at, again, that story that you're telling. And it was something that was a goal for us. And we said, this is an investment. This is something that we want to get behind. So that was certainly a factor. The water program was extremely inexpensive. So like it's small steps, fuel reduction saved on costs as well. Offsets were a minor light item. And there's nothing that should stop a big event from making that effort. There's really no hurdles that you should look at and say, gosh, this is just too much for me to overcome to accomplish it. Because quite honestly, as we've been saying all along, it's the right thing to do, and 2, I can guarantee you that your ROI is going to cover the cost based on the story that you can tell. Again, budget wasn't a big deal. It just accomplished what we accomplished on the marketing side. Covered specifically everything that we spent to accomplish it. So I can't share a lot of marketing specifics in terms of like how many dollars there are, just because it probably wouldn't make sense to everybody here. But I can tell you that our net was in the positive. We were in the black on the topic of this certification with the Council for Responsible Sport, and our partnership with Waste Management have returned to us manyfold.
That's great to hear. Thanks, Dave. Yeah. What about you, Lee?
Sorry about that. Yeah, I was just going to say something we both kind of touched on, which is that mapping out all areas of operation and potential improvement really helps any event, but also any organization create a short and long-term plan. We support a lot of different events, and when we do, there's always clear immediate wins, but that follow-up review process, it enables them internally and externally to identify areas where they want to do better. And that type of transparency is really important to people. Dave touched on waste diversion. When you're in a community like Boulder, they want to see that. They don't want to participate in events that are not taking the right steps to choose the right materials and put things in streams that have an actual positive impact instead of a negative impact. As you look forward and you're thinking about growing year to year, you want to lean on, your experience to provide plans and that are going to grow accordingly. And you want to reach more and more stakeholders. We work at events, again, that we'll in that first year, you try to reach a certain number of people, but but then after that, you're able to say, oh, we missed this group, and we can engage them in the following way and try to expand the program and work towards greater positive impacts. And then I would also say that we're talking with you, Shelley, the council certification process has really been a great tool for us to show people. It challenges them to go further, but it also highlights best practices through different credit options. So when we want to work with an event and we suggest the council certification, we'll take them through the different credits, and it really helps them understand the various options, and it serves as a reminder to how to expand your agenda. We've been working on council certifications for over 5 years and achieving Evergreen at several events. So when we take someone through the tracking spreadsheet, it really kind of makes things more tangible for them. They can see, oh, it isn't just 61 massive efforts. Here are the little steps we can take along the way in our planning and our procurement and our resource management, in how we are providing access and equity to people, and then our community legacy. When you work on all those things and show them the details through the council certification, it's a great mechanism to try to understand what you're able to accomplish.
Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate you saying that, Lee, and it's great to hear that there's value in that framework for you and your partners. And I think that's a great note to close on. There's value in properly managing your event's natural resource consumption, and looking at aspects of social equity and legacy, and what are the impacts you're having on your community. And I'll just mention that the certification standards themselves were created by event organizers for one another, just sharing those, what was working, what wasn't, and what they should be doing but maybe weren't and wanted to. So that was 10 years ago now, and look where we are. We're having events like yours, Dave, and all the successful champions who are meeting their goals, and we're all moving this thing forward together. So I just want to emphasize that as we close. It's important to remember that we're all in this journey together towards a greater responsibility for our individual and our collective decisions and the impacts that they have. So along those lines, I want to thank you both so much for sharing your time and your insights. Dave, Lee, really much gratitude, and thank you for all the amazing work you're doing and for sharing it with us and to whomever is listening out there. We hope to stay in touch, and we want to hear from anyone who is listening. If you're ready to hear more and get engaged, our contact info is available to you. It was on that past slide there. Maybe you jotted it down, but if you're on the council's website, you can definitely find it. So anything else to add, guys, or we're just going to sign off here? Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Lee, thank you. Thank you, Shelley. I like the tagline here on this last slide, engage, certify. The last line is inspire. That would be what I would add. I think that we should be inspiring other people to do better, and I hope that this story does that.
Awesome. All right. Cheers, virtual world. We're out.